Right, so I'd just like to make a few final points about this. Um, I hope it's now evident to you that the relations between the causes are more significant than the causes themselves, right? Seeing what is the relation between the matter and the form, or the form and the efficient time and date stamped features, and how it all fits into somebody's larger um, uh, literary or political or intellectual effort. Those are things that really matter. The point of separating out the four causes is precisely to understand more clearly how they all fit together. You can't ask the question about how the elements all relate until you've separated them, right? So if you think about analysis and synthesis in chemistry, so what does chemical analysis mean? It means taking some substance and separating it out into its elements. So you can say, this molecule is made up of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, or whatever, right? So analysis is the separation of a molecule into its chemical elements. Synthesis is where you take the elements and you combine them, and because you're going from the elements to the combination, you're able to understand the nature of the bonds between this is sort of bivalent bonds for chemistry students there. You're able to understand the nature of the bonds between the elements, right? So what we're doing here is a textual equivalent of that chemical process of analysis and then synthesis. So you separate the four elements, or the four causes, the four explanatory factors. You separate them out, and then you ask yourself how they fit together, and you create your tetrahedron. Okay, so one thing I want to say about here is this can function as a criterion of literary quality, right? So you can, if you want to argue that a text is good, you can say, well, look, one of the ways this text is good is because these four elements fit together really well. Or if you want to argue that it's badly done, you can say, well, look, one of the problems with this text is that the formal and efficient causes don't go together. They, like I was talking to you before, if you tried to publish some beat poetry in the 18th century, right? If Doctor Who stepped out of a TARDIS and started reciting beat poetry in the 18th century, probably wouldn't go down well. Wrong genre for the time. So it can be a criterion of quality, but it doesn't ask whether the contents are true, right? So a book might be full of falsehoods. A book could be full of lies, and it could be really well done. It could be that the right lies are chosen and presented in the right way, in the right format, and published in the right way at the right time, aimed at the right audience, to be really effective and to fit into somebody's larger project of spreading lies, right? So you could get something that ticks all the boxes in terms of these four causes, but actually is full of falsehoods. So there's one question that this little system doesn't ask, which is it true? Okay. So this is useful for reading philosophy, because the thing that's really often very hard to get when you're reading a philosophical text is the material cause. So you read a philosophical text and you can't get what it's saying. You can't understand the literal content. Great thing about this little system is it gives you 3 other questions to ask. You can ask about the format. You can ask about the who and the when and the where and the publishing things. And you can ask about the larger philosophical project that it's part of. And if you answer those 3 questions, and normally you look at secondary sources for that kind of material, you answer those 3 questions and then come back to the material cause, come back to the basic question of, well, what does it say? You may find that it's easier. It may find that some of the things you've discovered about the formal, efficient and final causes help you to interpret the text in a way that reveal the material cause to you. When you're reading philosophy, it's very often that way round. For example, Descartes, the content of Descartes' philosophy is radically subjective, right? What does he do? He tells you to doubt the evidence of your senses. So he kind of cuts you off from the material world. He says, well, you know, you can't be sure that the objects around you, even your own body, you can't be sure that they really exist. All you really have is your mind. So and you don't even know about other people's minds, only your own. The only thing you know is that I exist because I'm as a thing that thinks. I'm a thing that thinks. That's all you know, right? So if you think about it, he kind of shrinks your world down to the contents of your consciousness, right? It's just you as a thinking thing. Now, he puts this argument in 2 major texts. The Cogito, right? The Meditations. Sorry, the Cogito is the name of the argument. The Meditations and the Principles of Philosophy. What are the formats? Well, the Meditations is in the form of a diary, and the Principles of Philosophy is in the form of an autobiography. These are the 2 first-person literary forms, right? These are the 2 literary forms in which you describe your own experiences from a first-person perspective without assuming the existence of anybody reading, right? So those literary forms match the philosophical content. If there's just Descartes on his own, locked in his own consciousness, the appropriate literary format for that is something solipsistic, something solitary, like the diary or the autobiography. So there are these connections between the 4 causes in philosophy as well. So answering the 3 other questions, the format, form, the efficient cause, the who, what, where, why, and when, and the larger project can lead you to insights about the material cause. Final thought about this stuff. There's a thought I want to offer you about the difference between the humanities and the natural sciences. And it's a thought we'll come back to in future weeks. In the humanities, we tend to explain things by contextualizing them, right? So in history you do this, in literature you do this, and I'm showing you how to do this in philosophy as well. You take something you want to understand, a historical event or a literary text or a philosophical work, and you put it in context. You put it in its historical context, you put it in its logical context, you ask what argument is it part of in the case of philosophy. You think about who wrote it, what's gone before, what came after. You think about its format as well as what it says, and you try and understand how these elements go together. This is different from the natural sciences. The natural sciences, you take things, well, physics, you take things out of their context, right? So You think about the classic physics exam question about if you drop a heavy object from a certain height, from rest, how long will it take before it hits the ground? You decontextualize it. You don't ask, what object is it? Who does it belong to? Who's dropping it? Why are they dropping it? Have such objects been dropped before? What are the legal consequences of dropping such objects? Is it culturally shocking to drop such objects, or is it something that people do every year or something? You don't do any of that. You abstract the dropping of the object. So it might be somebody dropping a mobile phone off a cliff, or it might be somebody, I don't know, throwing somebody else's mobile phone over a cliff, right? Very different human acts. Physics doesn't care because physics decontextualizes. So there's a thought that maybe the difference between the humanities and the natural sciences is that the humanities contextualize and the natural sciences decontextualize. Now, I'm not offering that as doctrine. You aren't supposed to walk away believing that. I want you to offer that to you as a thought, which you can worry about, think about whether it's true, and if so, to what extent, and with what caveats, with what exceptions, or with what warnings. Okay, so that's plenty of stuff for 1 week. See you soon.